the second exorcist I ever assisted, we had this terrible case. It went on for years, and she kept trying to stick her hand down my shirt. And finally, one day, he got annoyed and commanded the demon, "Tell me why you're." And she said, "Because I'm trying to get her garment off of him." And
you're wearing the scapular or something?
Yeah. And he said, "Why?" And she said, "Because as soon as I take that garment off, then I can rip his head off." And I remember thinking, well, I'm going to double knot that, right? Like,
What do you think that we as Catholics can learn from, I guess, exorcisms, but broadly speaking, spiritual warfare in general? I mean, is it just the normal life of the church that is protective against these dark experiences, or should we be frightened? Sounds like you're not frightened. You extol the power of Mary and the saints and the precious blood and all that. And people are, in some sense, I imagine that there's actually spiritual value in people being scared of spiritual warfare.
Sure. In a certain sense. Yeah. Right. In a certain sense. I think I would never, ever encourage someone to be scared outside of someone who has left the Lord, right? Like, it is very clear to me that someone who is with the Lord is terrifying to the devil. And that's what I teach my kids, right? Like, so like they're not afraid, because even though they know what I do, it's kind of seeped in. No matter how much you try to protect it, you live with somebody, it happens, right? But they're not afraid, because I teach them, like, no, the devil's afraid of you, right? And I think that's really important for us to get back onto that idea, because it is true. Now, that being said, when they get older, you better believe that I'll teach them, you leave the Lord and he'll sift you like wheat, right? The devil will sift you like wheat. There's no question. Like that is a dangerous and scary situation, but nothing to be afraid of. We love to do this. I have like kind of this meme on my Facebook that someone made for me for a parish mission one time. And it was Jesus and the devil arm wrestling, right? And it was a joke, right? And people went nuts, right? Because philosophically that's ridiculous. And that's what we have to remember. Philosophically, that is ridiculous. There's no equivocation between the power of evil and the power of goodness, right? It's not possible. You can't scale them, because it's not possible. In our human brains, we're always going to do that, right? We're always going to put them on a scale and see which one, okay, good's going to tip even infinitely, but it's not possible. Like, the infinite goodness of God can't be measured against a creature, right?
Yeah. Do you ever feel like so much of your spiritual protection depends on the details of your prayer life? In other words, I didn't say my St. Michael prayer today. I'm vulnerable.
Okay.
Satan's going to get me. Like to what extent,
right.
do you feel spiritually vulnerable?
No, certainly not. I think if you're in a state of grace, I don't worry very much. I worry more about my social and emotional health than I do because if you're living in a state of grace, right, you're protected as much as you can be, okay, as much as you can be, and as much as you should be, right? And we're always going to be attacked. But emotionally and my emotional health and mental health, that's something I take very seriously, right? The reason I stepped away from assisting is because my wife passed away, right? And I did make the mistake of attending an exorcism about 3 months later. And I don't know what I was thinking. I just weren't
ready for that.
It's just always been part of my life. And I went, and immediately they just seized on that. And they we're the ones who killed your wife. We're the ones, we were there. We laughed, all these things. And it was like, oh, I'm out, I was supposed to be here a week. I'm done. There's no way I can do this. I got to go home, recharge, get my mind right. So those kinds of things play a big role because we're human beings, right? We're,
right.
And so that's a big deal. So I'm careful about that. Now, the idea that a certain prayer, I didn't say it, I'm in trouble. Not at all. Not in any way whatsoever. What I would say is, on the opposite side of that, I have seen anything Marian plays a major role in protecting me and others and anyone involved, right? One of the first things I remember is the second exorcist I ever assisted. We had this terrible case. It went on for years, and she kept trying to stick her hand down my shirt. And finally, one day he got annoyed and commanded the demon, tell me why. And she said, because I'm trying to get her garment off of him. And
Oh, you're
he
wearing a
said,
scapular or something?
yeah. And he said, why? And she said, because as soon as I take that garment off, then I can rip his head off. And I remember thinking, well, I'm going to double knot that, right? Like, you know, yeah. And several times, Marian things have come up where I've been like, oh, thank God that I had this devotion as a young man, because it's played such a role in my protection. So,
yeah. Now, does that devotion, does it need to be something that you're consciously, consistently renewal? You made that consecration and you're good. You feel confident.
I mean, I do consecrate. I do renew it, you know, because I think it's my spirituality is decidedly Marian. And so I do renew it, but I don't worry about that. In fact, I've seen a situation where, you know, this demon, it was a new exorcist. They didn't have the control that they needed to have, and this demon was just pummeling people in the room, and I wasn't being touched. And he commanded, you know, he interrogated the demon. It was because, well, he consecrated himself when he was 16. Like, there's nothing I can do. Wow. Now is that 100% rule? No. But in that case, it saved me, right? Like, it helped me. You know,
it's comforting.
Yeah. Right. Of course it is. Right. Yeah. I mean, there's no, if you, right. My area of study now is intensely focused on Mariology. And if you read Maximilian Kolbe, right, I mean, there is no doubt in my mind, right, that Mary will be the deciding factor in the history of the world, right? That her winning to her people, to her heart, is going to be what wins the end, right? And so, and he says this over and over and over again, like, there can be no final win unless we win people to the Immaculata, right? And so it's very clear. In fact, reading his letters, I finally just finished, you know, all the letters that have been translated in English, and it's like getting a master's class in Mary crushing the head of the serpent, right? Because he brings it up over and over again.
Yeah. In the end, my immaculate heart will triumph.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm interested too in what you said about, I'm thinking about how when you, after your wife had passed away and you went to the exorcism and the demons, they were overtly using that to cause you to feel, I mean, probably all sorts of things. You know, temptation to despair, probably not least among them. I'm wondering if that sort of thing happens in a much more invisible way for all of us all the time.
100%. So they're always going to attack you at your lowest, right? And they know, right? I mean, they can't read your mind, but when we say they can't read your mind, we're talking about a very specific thing, right? Like, they have access to your lower faculties. So imagination and memories, like, they'll mess with it all day, right? I mean, they'll really go to town on that.
Can you say a little more about that? So sure. They can't read your mind, but have access to your lower faculties. What's the distinction there?
Yeah. So in Thomistic, like, philosophy, or Thomistic psychology, probably would be a better way to look at this, right? There's different levels, and some of it's in our brain, right? Some of it's in our soul. Okay. And so, like, in our mind, our soul, right, the God reserves that for himself. Like, he reserves that access for himself. But some of what we think we might attribute to the soul, it really happens because of our bodies, right? Our brains. And so imagination is part of that, right? Like, animals have imagination. There are animals that, you know, you can tell that they're, like, you know, dreaming. A dog can imagine. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. And memories as well, right? Okay. Our memory would be a function of our brain. Okay. There'd be some concert, right? They're working together, but, they're masters of biology, demons, right? They can get all through that kind of stuff, and they can read our biology very well, better than we can.
So they're tweaking our neural pathways in order to.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Wow. And in extreme cases, like, an example of an extreme case of this would be, it's very common in an exorcism, for the exorcism to end, the person to come out of the demonic trance and say, "You raped me when I was 10. And it's like, well, you lived in Alaska. I've never met you. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's this memory that they have that is crazy. And they can also, they really go after, I mean, you're in psychology, right? So they really go after, like, your associative and disassociative processes. So it's very possible. Like, I mean, you see this in marriages, right? In marriages, like wake up and they're just mad at the spouse. They don't know why. They can't tell you a reason or anything like that. They're just angry, right? And you're like, well, did you ever think it could be the devil? Like, just like, messing with that, like, right? That you're having this issue. And certainly that's possible. They do it all the time. So they're going to go after you at your lowest, right? Your very lowest. So they know what your memories are. They know what happened to you, what could have happened to you, things that times you were scared, things like that. And they've been watching and they talk, right? They consort together. And they also, I mean, the biggest thing about Mary's power over them is that they have no knowledge of her, right? Because the way they gain knowledge about us is through temptation. So, like for me, right, if somebody puts a pizza in front of me, like every demon on earth is going to know my problem, right? Like I want that pizza, right? Like they know because my body like starts like revving up, right? Like this is what I want. This is what I want.
Pupils dilating.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. But for Mary, right, she didn't have that, right? She was like, this immaculate being, right? And so they don't know her, right? They're confused when she shows up during exorcisms, and that's one of the ways that I always try to tell cases about fighting them is like, yeah, you can do all of the St. Michael prayers. You can do all of the blessed salts, the holy water. And I think that's all fine in order, right? But the best thing you can do is just obey. Like stop sinning. That's how they lose their toehold, right? Because at the end of the day, the worst possession on earth doesn't condemn you to hell. What condemns you to hell is mortal sin, right? Like, and so you want to like win those moral battles. That's what's important.
Yeah.
So,
and that's empowered by prayer as well. Getting
right.
the grace to
of course. Right.
And devotion to Our Lady,
of course,
actually helps with that quite a bit.
Yeah. Right.
Cool.